He died 2 decades ago. At least, that's what every official paper said. But this morning, I saw his signature in the command log, that familiar "are kicking up like a dare." I dialed the number from an old file, and a man answered. His first words were, "Don't use your father's real name here." In that instant, I knew something was more dangerous than the secret the people were willing to kill to keep. My name is Stella Baker. I am 35 years old, and I am the Chief of Facility Security for the Charleston Harbor Command Complex. My world is built on protocols, concrete barriers, and the predictable hum of high-voltage fences. My mornings smell like industrial-grade floor wax, and the faint briny dampness that crawls in off the Cooper River. At 0700 hours, the air is already thick, a humid blanket that the HVAC systems in the command center barely fight. The low country humidity is relentless. It seeps into everything, including the paperwork. I was in the main atrium, at post 1. The morning rush is a predictable rhythm, a metronome of controlled access, the click-clack of hard-soled shoes on the polished terrazzo floor, the electronic beep of common access cards swiped at the turnstiles, the low murmur of greetings. I stood by the primary console, my eyes scanning the visitor manifest on the monitor. Tuesday. Tuesdays are usually just supply vendors and engineering consults. A steady stream of green-lit badges. My team, uniformed and alert, moved efficiently, checking IDs, matching faces to the Privet list. Everything was in its place. Routine is safety. Order is control. I live by that creed. It is the only thing that makes sense. That is when I saw the deviation. It was not on my monitor. It was on the backup hard copy log. An addendum sheet slipped into the 3-ring binder by the night shift supervisor. 0900, the entry read, Visitor Admiral Lionel Beck, retired. My stomach tightened. Retired flag officers do not just drop by a high-security complex like this. They are announced weeks in advance, and they are met by public affairs. They are given escorts. They do not appear on a morning addendum sheet, as if they were the pizza delivery guy. The purpose listed was even more unusual. Honor log signing. We have an honor log. It is a thick, blue, leather-bound volume embossed with the gold command seal. It is kept in a climate-controlled glass case in the rotunda, usually reserved for visiting foreign dignitaries, or the formal change of command. It is ceremonial, not operational. I looked closer at the entry on the paper. It was handwritten in black ink. This alone was a significant breach. All visitor requests, even last-minute ones, are supposed to be digitally routed through the Joint Visitor Bureau. This ensures a digital footprint, a chain of custody. This one had no electronic timestamp. It just was. Someone with significant internal clearance, someone with access to the physical shift logs, had authorized this manually, bypassing the entire digital security architecture. At 0858, exactly 2 minutes early, the automatic glass doors at the atrium entrance hissed open. He did not look like a man enjoying retirement. Admiral Lionel Beck was tall, perhaps 6 feet 2 inches, and ramrod straight in a dark civilian suit that probably cost more than my last paycheck. He moved with a precision that belied his age, which I knew from the file flashing in my head was north of 70. But there was a flaw in the machine. His limp was distinct, a right-sided drag, as if the leg was resisting the command to move, favoring the hip. My officer at the desk, a young security specialist named Reevers, looked up, slightly intimidated by the bearing of the man. "Good morning, Admiral." "We have you expected," Reevers said. Beck just nodded, a curt dip of his chin. His eyes, pale blue and sharp as shattered ice, did something I am trained to spot in fractions of a second. They scanned the ceiling. He was not admiring the architecture, he was mapping the security cameras. He found the main dome camera, C1, and then subtly shifted his position as he approached the desk, turning his right shoulder toward it, obscuring the lower half of his face from the direct line of sight. He was actively avoiding surveillance. "The logbook, if you please," Beck said. His voice was gravelly, dry and low, like stones rolling in a weak tide. Reavers, following the specialized instructions that must have been left for him, retrieved the heavy blue volume from the glass case and placed it on the granite welcome desk. Beck reached into his breast pocket and produced his own pen, a heavy, old-fashioned fountain pen, black lacquer with a gold nib, not a government-issue Skillcraft. He uncapped it and leaned over the book. I moved closer, instinct pulling me forward. I stood perhaps 5 feet away, close enough to observe the transaction, officially supervising the handling of a controlled item, but really, I was trying to figure out why my nerves were screaming. His hand did not shake. He found a clean page and signed, Lionel Beck, Admiral, USN, Ret. Beneath that, a short dedication, in memory of those who served the true North. But I was not reading the words. I was looking at the way he wrote. The world tilted. The air in my lungs turned to glass. The steady hum of the atrium faded into a high-pitched whine. It was the R. The R in retired. It was structured perfectly, the vertical line strong, the loop precise, but the final downstroke, the leg of the letter, kicked up sharply to the right, almost jaunty, a little flag of defiance at the end of the word. My father's R. Commander Robert Donovan, missing in action, presumed dead since 2005. I saw that R on 20 years of birthday cards. I saw it on the margin notes of the copy of Moby Dick he gave me. I saw it on the dry erase board in his workshop listing hardware parts he needed. The last place I ever saw him alive. It was his. It was as unique as a fingerprint, an unconscious flourish of muscle memory, and it was sitting right in front of me, the ink still wet on the page. My father's handwriting, signed by another man. Reavers, nervous in the presence of a 4-star admiral, reached to offer the ceremonial glass of water kept at the desk for VIPs. His hand, slightly trembling, bumped the plastic cup. It tipped, spilling ice water across the granite, the puddle spreading rapidly, stopping just shy of the logbook's leather edge. Reavers gasped, his face flushing crimson. Sir, my apologies. Beck did not flinch. He did not startle. He did not even look at the spill. His eyes stayed on me, unwavering. It was the absolutely terrifying stillness of a man who had anticipated chaos, a reflex trained out of him, replaced by pure cold calculation. He had been prepared for something to go wrong. He slowly capped his pen. He looked directly at me, breaking his camera avoidance, his pale blue eyes locked onto mine. He knew, in that single shared second, he knew that I had recognized it. He leaned forward just slightly, enough for his voice to carry only to me over the atrium hum, bypassing Reavers entirely. Some things are best left undisturbed, Chief Baker. It was not advice, it was a command. He turned and, with that same stiff, dragging limp, he walked out the doors. The glass hissed shut behind him. My blood ran cold. My training took over, a firewall slamming down over the emotional explosion in my chest. The shock was a physical weight, but procedure was a shield. Reavers was still apologizing, grabbing paper towels from under the desk. I am so sorry, he stammered. It's fine, specialist, I said, my voice sounding distant, thin. Secure the log. Before he could close the book, I pulled my issued device from my belt. It looks like a bulky smartphone, but its primary function is security verification and forensic analysis. Wait, I commanded, stopping his hand. The ink on that pen. It's non-standard, Reavers said, scrambling to find a plausible excuse. I need to verify it for the log integrity. We can't have archival entries fading. It was a perfect lie, completely within my authority as head of security. I activated the device. It is technically an ink verification and document scanner. I held it over the page. The high-resolution scanner bathed the signature in ultraviolet light, then visible light, capturing the dedication, the signature, and the surrounding page in microscopic forensic detail. The image saved to my secured, encrypted drive, inaccessible to anyone but me. As I pulled the device away, I saw it. I almost missed it. It was not part of the ink. In the margin next to the heavy binding, written so faintly it was barely a disturbance on the fibers of the expensive cotton paper, was a pencil mark graphite. It was not words, but a date and a location, 4.15 Doc D, April 15th, Doc D. I stepped back, pocketing my device. The atrium suddenly felt too open, the ceiling too high. I looked up at the convex security mirror angled in the far corner, the one that covers the blind spot near the elevators. For a single heartbeat, I saw a shape. It was not a clear reflection, it was just a dark suit, a shoulder, the side of a head disappearing behind the concrete pillar. Someone had been standing in the blind spot, watching the entire exchange. Not Beck, someone else. They had been watching me. I felt the cold realization that the honor log signing was not the event. I was the target. My father, Beck, the signature, the warning, the watcher. I went straight to my office, my heels striking the floor faster than regulation. I locked the door behind me. The heavy thud of the mechanical bolt sliding home did nothing to calm the tremor in my hands. My job description was clear. If I suspected an internal security breach involving a flag officer, my protocol was to elevate the report to the base commander and the Naval Criminal Investigative Service immediately. I looked at the saved image on my device. The I stared back at me, a ghost in the machine. If I reported this, it would be taken away from me. It would be buried in classification. The system that had declared my father MIA, the system that had sent my mother a folded flag without a body, would absorb this anomaly. It would become evidence in an investigation I would be locked out of, and I would never know. To hell with procedure. I sat at my terminal and bypassed the standard chain of command. The heavy bolt of my office door sliding shut was the only sound in the room. It felt too loud, a definitive violation of my own orders. I sat at my terminal, the silence pressing in. My world is digital, structured, and absolute. I typed in my credentials that gave me access to nearly everything in the complex, and began to dig. I started with Beck, the archives entry, Admiral Lionel Beck, retired. The file was extensive, a career built in the shadows. His last active posting was Commander, North Atlantic Naval Intelligence Division NNOD, a unit that did not officially exist. A black-budget organization that handled maritime counterintelligence and specialized in tracking dark vessels. They were the people who found things the regular Navy could not and the people who made inconvenient things disappear. He was a professional ghost. Then my father. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Commander Robert Donovan. I typed the name and hit enter. The file that appeared was offensively thin. A career summarized in clipped acronyms, efficiency reports, and commendations until it just stopped. The digital header was stamped in red, MIA. Under review. Under review. It had been under review for 20 years, a status that meant nothing. It was a bureaucratic black hole. We never received the formal casualty notification. We never got the summary of action, the after-action report, the thing that tells a family how they just got a visit from a base chaplain, who looked too young, and a liaison officer, who refused to meet my mother's eyes. They used words like high risk and operational sensitivity. Then they left, taking all the answers with them. I scrolled to the last entry. It was dated April 2005. Incident File 44AE. Subject's operational status. File transferred to Internal Review Board jurisdiction. And that was it. The link to the Internal Review Board was grayed out. Access denied. The hum of the server rack in my office faded. I was not in my office anymore. I was 15 years old, standing on Pier 41, the air thick with salt and diesel fumes. It was the last time I saw him on shore. He was teaching me how to read the wind, not by the flags, but by the texture of the water. See that, he'd said, his voice rough against the noise of the gulls. He pointed out to a heavy container ship moving slowly toward the harbor mouth. Don't ever mistake silence for peace. The ocean is never peaceful, kid. It's just waiting. He was quiet that day, his eyes fixed on that ship as it left. He knew something. He was waiting, too. I slammed the memory shut. The cold, sterile air of my office returned. The man who taught me that lesson was gone, erased by the same organization that Lionel Beck had helped command. And Beck was now using my father's handwriting. My anger became precise, it became a tool. I pulled the security logs for the atrium, 0800 to 1000 hours. First, the visitor dispatch manifest. Beck's entry was exactly the anomaly I thought it was. It had not been routed through public affairs, which is mandatory for any flag officer, retired or active. It had not been authorized by the base commander's office. The visit was authorized by the night shift supervisor for logistics control. They had hidden a 4-star admiral in the mundane noise of a maintenance schedule. Someone with mid-level clearance had pushed him through a back door, bypassing the entire command-level notification system. Next, the video. I pulled the feed from C1, the main atrium dome, synced to the timestamp of the log. 0858. I watched him enter. I watched his eyes map the cameras. I watched him angle his body away from the primary lens. I saw myself approach. I saw Reavers fumble with the water. I zoomed in, frame by frame. Beck uncapped the pen. His hand moved. At 090218, the pen touched the paper. At 090219, the screen went grey. A small digital overlay read, "Data stream interrupted." My blood ran cold. At 090221, the feed returned. Beck was capping his pen. 3 seconds. A 3-second data drop, a perfect, surgical excision. It was not a glitch. A system fault would have triggered alarms all the way to my console and created a repair log. This was intentional. Someone was not just authorizing Beck, they were actively monitoring the situation in real time. This was not a cold case, this was happening right now. I needed to be sure. My mind was 99% certain, but the last piece was not logical, it was personal. I turned away from the terminal. In the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath secure file binders and spare ammo clips, is a small, locked metal box. It holds the few things that are mine, not the government's, a spare key to my apartment, a bottle of aspirin, and a single, frayed envelope. It was a birthday card, my 16th. It had arrived 3 months after he was officially declared missing. The postmark was from a naval forwarding station in Spain, mailed weeks before his last deployment began. It was the last thing his hand had ever touched that found its way to me. I pulled the card out. The paper was soft. His handwriting filled the inside. Happy birthday, Stell. 16. Stay true north. Love, Dad. I held it up, the thin paper trembling slightly in my hand. On my monitor, I still had the high-resolution image I had scanned from the honor log, in memory of those who served the true north. Stay true north. The phrase was a direct hit, a signal. Then I compared the letters, the R in Robert on the card, the R in retired on the log, the pressure of the stroke, the way the vertical line was drawn, and the leg. That final, defiant kick to the right, a flourish of confidence. It was not similar, It was identical. My breath caught in my throat. It was him. A 20-year-old muscle memory, perfectly preserved. This was not a forgery. It was a message, delivered by a man who specialized in secrets. Beck knew I would recognize it, he had to. His warning, "Some things are best left undisturbed," was not a threat to stay away, it was a test. He was asking if I had the courage to disturb them. I had to meet him. I went back to the terminal. I pulled up the secure directory for retired flag officers. Beck's private number was listed. I did not use my desk phone. I used my personal cell, standing in the corner of my office, as far from the wired infrastructure as I could get. It rang once, twice. A crisp, professional voice answered. Admiral Beck's residence. My name is Stella Baker, I said. I am the Chief of Security at the Harbor Command Complex. I need to speak with the Admiral regarding his visit this morning. There was a perfectly measured silence. I heard the faint click of a mute button being engaged, muffled, distant voices. She came back on the line, her tone unchanged. The Admiral is unavailable by phone. My stomach tightened. Please tell him it is a matter of urgent personal validation. It concerns the honor log and the name Robert Donovan. I had laid my cards on the table. Another pause. This one was longer. I could hear her breathing. He can see you, she said finally. 1900 hours at his residence. Do you know the Wadmalaw Island address? I can find it. One more thing, Ms. Baker, the secretary said, her voice dropping, losing its polished edge, replaced by something cold and absolute. Come alone. The line went dead. 7 p.m. tonight at his home, deep in the cypress swamps, alone. My training kicked back in. The evidence, the scan, it was everything. It could not stay on my server, and it could not stay on my person. If I walked into that swamp and did not walk out, the evidence died with me. I left my office. I took the service stairs down to the sublevel. The secondary security hub is a concrete box mostly used for storing old monitors and bulk cable. But it has one thing my primary office does not, a floor-safe, manual combination, completely off-network. I transferred the high-resolution scan of the signature, the 3-second video file of the data drop, and a scan of my father's birthday card onto a single encrypted USB drive. I sealed the drive in a waterproof evidence bag. I knelt on the cold concrete. I spun the heavy dial left, right, left. I heard the solid mechanical thunk of the tumblers aligning. I placed the drive inside, next to emergency override keys. I spun the dial, locking it away. I stood up, my mind clear. I had a mission. I walked back up the stairwell, my hand automatically checking the firearm on my hip. My heels clicked on the metal steps, the sound echoing in the concrete shaft. I reached the landing for my office hallway. The floors here are polished daily, a sterile, shining gray. I stopped. Right in front of my office door, stuck against the polished floor, was a single boot print. It was not a standard issue boot. The tread was deep, chevron-shaped, commercial grade, and it was caked in fresh, wet black mud. It was not the sandy soil of the base, it was pluff mud, the thick, sulfur-smelling muck from the tidal swamps. Someone had been standing right outside my door while I was downstairs. Someone knew. They knew I had the signature, and they knew I was digging. The watcher in the atrium, the hand on the video feed. They were not just watching Beck, they were watching me. The drive to Wadmalaw Island was a descent into darkness. The structured grid of the Charleston Naval Base, all concrete and right angles, gave way to winding two-lane roads shaded by ancient oaks. The air that pushed through my vents, no longer filtered by industrial HVAC, was thick, organic, and wet. It smelled of pluff mud and decay, that same black mud I had seen outside my office door. My hands were clamped to the steering wheel, a grip tight enough to make my knuckles ache. My training screamed at me. I was violating every security protocol I had ever written. I was walking knowingly into an unsecured meeting-off complex with a high-level subject connected to a 20-year-old mystery. I was doing it alone, exactly as they had requested. My service weapon was snug against my hip, a cold, insufficient comfort. My eyes scanned the rearview mirror every 3 seconds. Headlights appeared, lingered, then turned off onto side roads. Every car was a threat. The boot print was a clear signal. They were not confined to the base, they were here, in the real world. This was their terrain, the humid, tangled wetlands, where things could disappear and never be found. Beck's property was marked by a simple, unlit mailbox. The gravel driveway was nearly a quarter-mile long, a tunnel cut through a dense stand of cypress trees. The house was invisible from the road. When it finally emerged, it was not the glass and steel mansion I expected of a retired admiral. It was old brick, low and solid, anchored to the earth, its windows dark. It was a fortress disguised as a family home. The woman who answered the door was the voice from the phone, mid-50s, severe grey hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing a simple, practical dress. Her eyes were intelligent and empty of welcome. "Chief Baker, you are punctual." She led me through a dark foyer into a study. The room was panelled in dark, almost black mahogany. It smelled of old books, expensive whiskey, and the faint, sweet residue of pipe tobacco. It was the smell of my grandfather's study, a scent of authority and old secrets. Admiral Lionel Beck stood by a massive, unlit stone fireplace. He was exactly as I had seen him this morning, still in the dark suit, his posture a rigid line. He turned, and the limp was more pronounced, a heavy, painful drag of his right leg. He had been performing this morning, hiding the extent of it. "Chief Baker," he said, his voice gravelly. "Thank you for coming." The secretary closed the doors behind me, the thunk of the heavy wood sounding unnervingly final. "I am not here for pleasantries, Admiral," I said. I stayed standing, planting myself in the center of the room. "You used a non-regulation pen this morning, and you used my father's handwriting." Beck's pale eyes held mine. He did not deny it. He did not feign confusion. He simply nodded, a slow, tired acknowledgement. "It was a test," he said, his voice low. "I needed to know if Robert's daughter was still Robert's daughter, or if you were just another uniform. Is he alive?" The question hung in the air, sucking the oxygen from the room. It was the question I had buried for 20 years, the one I had trained myself to never ask. Beck walked, his limp echoing on the hardwood floor, to a wall dominated by framed photographs. They were not the usual political grip and grins. They were field photos, grainy, candid. Beck and my father, younger, on the deck of a destroyer, squinting into the sun. Beck and my father in dress whites at some formal event, laughing. Beck and my father, older, harder, in khaki uniforms, leaning over a navigation chart. They were friends, brothers. Even at the very end of the line of photos, on the corner of the massive mahogany desk, sat one more, a heavy, ornate silver frame. It was turned face down. "Alive," Beck said, his back to me as he stared at the wall of memories. "Is a complicated word. He is not dead. He was not on any ship that went down. There was no squall. There was no accident." My knees felt weak. I grabbed the back of a leather wingback chair to steady myself. "He is alive. He was disappeared." Beck corrected the words sharply. "Forced to vanish to protect himself and to protect you." "Protect me from what? From whom?" Beck turned from the wall. His face was a roadmap of old, impossible decisions. "From our own, from a contractor called Oil Dynamics." I knew the name. Everyone in the service knew it. They built half the fleet's navigation and weapon systems. Your father, Beck said, was the best logistics officer I ever knew. He did not just read supply manifests. He read the hardware. In 2004, he was overseeing the integration of a new series of guidance modules from Austal, Project Blue Requiem. They were designated for our most sensitive Allied vessels, a sign of shared trust. He paused, his eyes finding mine. Except Robert found a flaw, a lethal one. The modules were not properly shielded in extreme cold water environments, the kind our North Atlantic allies operate in. They would fail. The navigation system would drift, then scramble. A ship traveling at 30 knots, blind in an ice-filled channel. It was catastrophic. It was murder. He reported it, I said. It was not a question. It was who my father was. He reported it, Beck confirmed. He sent the report up the chain, directly to the procurement office, directly to Austal. He refused to certify the shipment, and he was given a direct order to sign. The shipment was worth billions. OWL had partners high in the command structure. They were not going to let a commander from Charleston scuttle their biggest contract of the decade. They told him to sign. He refused. He refused. Beck said he told them he was taking his findings to the Inspector General. He was going to burn the whole program down. That, Beck said, his voice dropping, was his mistake. He threatened them. What happened? I asked. I was head of NAD at the time. The call did not go to his commanding officer. It came to me. It was not an official order, it was a strategic discussion. They told me Robert Donovan was unstable, that he was compromised, that he was a threat to national security and Allied relations. They ordered me to contain him, to stop the report from ever being filed. You were supposed to arrest him, I whispered, the cold, grey reality of it settling on me. Worse? I was ordered to discredit him, to build a file, to declare him unfit, and if he resisted, they made it clear that a tragic accident would be an acceptable outcome. They were going to kill him, Stella. They were going to kill your father to protect their stock price. So you helped him. He was my friend, Beck said, the words cutting through the silence. I betrayed my orders. I went to him at the marina. I told him he had 12 hours before the warrant was signed. I told him to take his boat, the First Light, and to aim for the Gulf Stream and not look back. I filed the MIA report myself. A vessel lost in a sudden storm. It was clean. It was believable. And it made the whole problem go away. Your father died, and the problem died with him. I sank into the leather chair. My mind reeled. 20 years of grief. 20 years of hating the ocean for taking him. It was all a lie. Why? I finally managed to ask. Why sign that book? Why bring me here? Beck's face lost its nostalgic sadness and became hard, tactical. Because time is up. Someone at your complex has reopened the file. The boot print. The Watcher. It was supposed to be a sealed file, I said. Internal Review Board. It was, but someone with high-level clearance triggered an archival audit 2 weeks ago. They are looking for the original report Robert filed. OWL is now OWL Meridian. A new name, but the same vipers. They must be planning to sell that same faulty tech again, and they are cleaning up loose ends. And Robert Donovan is the last loose end. The signature, I said, you did it to warn me. I did it to see whose cage it rattled, Beck corrected. The data drop on your camera feed this morning. The Watcher in the atrium. That was not my team. That was them. They know the file is open. They know he had a daughter. They know you are chief of security. They were watching to see what you would do. Your visit here tonight has confirmed their fears. He walked to his desk and picked up a thick manila envelope. It was not glued, it was sealed with a disc of dark blue wax pressed with an unfamiliar insignia. He gave this to me 6 months ago, Beck said. He knew this day might come. He said, give this to Stella when she is ready. He held it out. My hand was shaking. I took it. It was heavy, packed with what felt like paper and something hard, like a cassette. What is it? Evidence, his full report, everything. And a way to contact him. Beck leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But you can never use his real name. Not on a phone, not in an email. The networks are compromised. They are listening. If you need to reach him, the code is First Light. That is the only name you can use. First Light. Do you understand? I nodded, clutching the envelope. Go home, Chief Baker, Beck said, his voice suddenly weary, the age returning to him. Read it and decide what you are going to do. But know this, from the moment you walked out of that atrium. You are no longer just a security chief. The drive home was a paranoid nightmare. I put the envelope on the passenger seat, where it seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Twice on the long, dark stretch of highway before the interstate, a pair of headlights settled in behind me. A dark sedan. No markings. It did not try to pass. It did not tailgate. It just stayed a perfect, professional distance behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was trained for this, but this was not a drill. Just before the bright lights of a 24-hour gas station, the sedan's turn signal flashed, and it calmly exited, disappearing into the darkness. It was a message, *, we see you. We know where you are. We can touch you. *. I made it to my apartment, and locked all 3 deadbolts. I stood in my kitchen, the silence of the room deafening. I stared at the envelope. When you're ready. I was not ready. For 20 years, my father was a ghost, a memory, a martyr. His absence was the defining fact of my life. It was the reason I wore a uniform, the reason I pushed for perfection, the reason I trusted protocols above people. This envelope could turn that ghost into a man who had left me, a man who had let my mother and me believe he was dead. The ambiguity of his loss was a clean wound. The truth felt like a betrayal. I was terrified of what was inside, not the data, not the contractor. I was terrified to find out if the father I remembered was a lie. I left the envelope on the table and went to bed, but I did not sleep. At 0600 hours, the sun came up. I knew I could not do this alone. I picked up the envelope, my keys, and I drove, not to the base, but to the small, quiet street where I grew up. My mother, Elaine Donovan, was in her garden. She was always in her garden. I saw her from the street, kneeling in the soft dirt, her hands gentle on a rose bush. She looked up when my car door slammed. Her face creased with a small, welcoming smile. The smile died when she saw my face. Stella, my God, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have, Mom. I sat on the white-painted porch step, the envelope in my lap. She sat next to me, wiping the dark soil from her hands onto her apron. I did not know what to say. I just held the envelope out to her. She stared at it. She did not ask what it was, her eyes fixed on the dark blue wax seal, her breath hitched. Her hand, weathered and strong, reached out. She did not take the envelope. She just touched her fingertips to the wax, tracing the insignia. Robert Seal, she whispered, her voice cracking. From his time at Ninod. You recognize it. She looked away from me, her gaze going distant. Seeing a past I had never known. A month after they told us he was gone, she said, her voice thin. A man came to this house. Not a chaplain, an officer in a dark suit. He told me that if I ever wanted you to be safe, if I ever wanted you to grow up and have a life, I had to stop asking questions. He told me to accept the report. He told me that my questions, my digging, could put you in danger. She turned back to me, her eyes shining with 20 years of tears she had never shed in front of me. So I did, Stella. I stopped asking. I let them call him a ghost. I did it to protect you. My mother's words hung in the humid morning air. I did it to protect you. For 20 years, I had believed her silence was a symptom of grief, a passive surrender. I realized now, sitting on the porch step of the house I grew up in, that it had been an act of war. She had been holding the line alone for 2 decades. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Elaine Donovan was not just my mother. She was a survivor of a psychological operation. A woman who had chosen her child's safety over her own need for answers. He told me, she said, her voice trembling, he said they would find a way to hurt you. Stella, she whispered, her hands twisting in the fabric of her gardening apron. He said Robert had made enemies of men who owned parts of the government, that they would call it a security risk, and that they could take you from me. So, I stopped asking. My hand was clamped around the heavy manila envelope Beck had given me. The dark blue wax seal felt hard and cold against my palm. My father's seal, a thing he had used, a piece of him, tangible and real, that had existed in the world while I believed he was ash in the sea. My mother's eyes were fixed on the seal. I haven't seen that in so long. Robert. Oh, Robert. I could not afford to feel her grief. Mine was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. It was fuel. I took my thumbnail and dug it into the edge of the wax. It was brittle. It cracked. A small, dry sound that seemed to echo in the quiet morning. I broke the seal. Inside was a stack of paper folded twice, heavy government-grade bond, and beneath it, the hard plastic case of a mini cassette. I unfolded the letter. It was dated 6 months ago. The handwriting was unmistakable. Not the single, defiant R from the honor log, but the familiar, precise, slightly backslanted script I knew from my childhood. He had written it to both of us, my dearest Elaine and Stella. If you are reading this, it means Beck has kept his word, and the time for silence is over. I am alive. I am sorry. Those are the only 2 things that matter, and they are the 2 things I could never tell you. I did not leave you. I was forced to. In 2004, I discovered that Dynamics, under the Blue Requiem project, was knowingly shipping lethally defective guidance modules. They were not just faulty, they were designed to fail. They were swapping certified hardware for cheap, unshielded components, then billing the Navy for the full price, and routing the profits through a series of shell companies. I traced it. Low Country Holdings Maritime Solutions. I refused to sign off on the shipment. I threatened to go public. They gave the order to contain me. Beck, my friend, was the man tasked to do it, but they misjudged him. He gave me 12 hours. He gave me a choice, be buried by their lies or be buried by the sea. We staged it. Elaine, the storm, the lost boat. It was the only way. A dead man's family is left to grieve in peace. A whistleblower's family is a target, a variable to be controlled. I chose to let you grieve, to give Stella a life free of them. It was the only love I had left to give. I could not protect myself, so I protected you by disappearing. But they are stirring again. Beck tells me they have a new name, but the same men are in charge. They are trying to sell the same poison. If they are looking for the old files, they will eventually come looking for me, and they will come looking for you. If you read this, I am in the place I always told you was safest. I am hiding in the noise. Georgetown Marina. Look for the boat, first light. The paper trembled in my hand. My mother was weeping beside me, a lifetime of suppressed grief breaking free in silent, ragged sobs. He's alive, I said. The words felt strange in my mouth, like a foreign language. All this time, he's alive. Stella, my mother gasped, grabbing my arm. Her grip was strong. That man who came here, the one who warned me, he was real. This is real. They will hurt you. They are already trying, I said, my voice flat, cold. The boot print, the dark sedan, the watcher in the atrium. They have been watching me for weeks. Beck's performance yesterday was just to confirm it. I stood up. The world, which had been tilted on its axis for 24 hours, suddenly snapped into sharp, clear focus. The shock was gone. The grief was gone. All that was left was the mission. I am going to Georgetown now. No, Stella. It is a trap. It has to be. It does not matter, I said. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope along with the cassette. It is the only move I have. They are already hunting me. My only chance is to find him before they do. I looked at my mother. Her face was pale with a new, more immediate terror. I put my hands on her shoulders. Mom, listen to me. You have to be stronger now than you have been for 20 years. You tell no one. Not your sister, not my cousins, not a soul. You have not seen me this morning. You do not know about this envelope. You do not know about Beck. Do you understand me? Her eyes widened, a silent plea. You go back to your garden. You are just a widow grieving. That is the only thing that keeps you safe. She nodded, biting her lip, the tears still streaming. I love you, Mom. I did not wait for a reply. I drove. I took my personal vehicle, not my government one. I broke my own protocol, leaving my service weapon at home, and instead taking the concealed carry compact I kept in a private safe. A government weapon has a tracker. This one was mine. The drive north on Highway 17 was 90 minutes of pure weaponized adrenaline. It was different from the paranoid trip into the swamp the night before. This was not a drive into darkness, it was a drive toward a target. The landscape blurred past my windows, endless stretches of salt marsh and long, high bridges over the dark, tidal rivers of the low country. Georgetown was not like Charleston. It was an old working port, its waterfront lined with shrimp boats and rough-looking industrial depots, not pastel-colored tourist shops. It smelled of the ocean, but also of diesel fuel, rotting fish, and the thick plough mud of the estuary. It smelled real. The marina was a maze of wooden docks and fiberglass hulls. I found a parking spot, killed the engine, and just sat for a full minute, watching. A man hosed down the deck of a sport fishing boat. A family loaded coolers onto a pontoon, the noise my father had written about. Dock, slip 21. There it was. Asterisk first light. Asterisk it was not a showboat, it was a trawler, maybe 45 feet, with a high bow and a solid, work-worn deck. It was built for open water, for survival. Its white hull was streaked with salt and rust, its blue canvas faded by 1,000 suns. It looked like it had been around the world twice, and was ready to go again. It was the boat of a man, who did not plan on being found. I stopped at the head of the slip, 10 feet from the transom. The boat was still rocking, almost imperceptibly, in the water. It was quiet, too quiet. First light, I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the open air. Nothing. I stepped onto the dock, walking slowly, my senses screaming. The smell of damp rope and old oil, the clang, clang, clang of a loose halyard hitting a nearby sailboat's mast. The cabin door, a heavy teak panel, slid open with a smooth, oiled sound. He stepped out. My heart stopped. The man in my memory was 38, with dark brown hair and an easy smile. The man in front of me was almost 60. His hair was silver, nearly white, and pulled back in a short tail. His face was a map of sun and wind, the skin cured like old leather. He was thinner than I remembered, harder. All the softness of the man who had read me stories was gone. He stood there on the deck of his boat, and he looked at me, and his eyes were the same. The same calm, steady, impossibly blue eyes that had taught me how to read the wind on Pier Kilo. The same eyes that had looked at me with absolute certainty and said, "Don't ever mistake silence for peace." Time fractured. The gulls, the water, the clanging mast, it all dissolved into a high-pitched whine in my ears. This was the man I had mourned for half my life. He was not a ghost, he was real. His voice was rougher than I remembered, cracked by sea air. "You're Stella," he was checking. He was not sure. I was 15 when he left. The shock, the tidal wave of 20 years of abandonment and rage and grief rose up in my throat. I swallowed it. I swallowed it whole, because as he spoke, I saw it on the adjacent dock, 2 slips down. A man in a baseball cap, supposedly fixing a fishing reel, had paused. He was listening. My training, my father's training, took over. I did not run to him. I did not cry. I became the security chief. I answered him, not as his daughter, but as his new operative. "Don't use my real name here," I said, my voice low and hard. A flicker of something passed across his face. It was not hurt. It was not disappointment. It was recognition. It was pride. He saw the woman I had become, the woman he had inadvertently trained me to be. He nodded once, a sharp, validating gesture. Inside. Now, the cabin was immaculate. Spartan. A navigation station with modern, high-end electronics sat next to a small galley. It smelled of dark coffee and the sharp, clean scent of ozone from the equipment. He did not hug me. He did not say he was sorry. There was no time for the reunion. We were in the field. "Beck said you were smart," he said, bolting the cabin door behind us. "He did not say you were fast." Beck flushed me out, I countered, my voice shaking almost imperceptibly. He put a target on my back. He knew they were watching. He had to, my father said. He was no longer Dad, he was Robert. He had to confirm their target. "They've been auditing the Blue Requiem files. They were looking for me. Beck had to know if they were also looking for you. Now we know they are." He turned from the door, knelt on the floorboards, and pulled up a panel from a dark, waterproof compartment. He lifted a small grey metal ammo can. It was sealed with heavy-duty electrical tape. He set it on the chart table with a solid thud. "This," he said, "is why they are hunting me. The real report." He broke the tape seal and opened the lid. It was not just a report, it was packed tight, invoices, shipping manifests from the shell companies he had named in the letter, offshore bank transfer records, and at the bottom, the mini-cassette. "What's on it?" I asked. "Field Debrief 2005. It is the audio recording of the procurement meeting, the one where Vice Admiral Holloway himself gave me the direct, illegal order to sign off on the faulty hardware. It is the audio of my refusal." He closed the box, the metal lid clicking shut with terrifying finality. He pushed it across the table to me. "The truth is a tool, Stella," he said, his steady blue eyes holding mine, the eyes of a commander, not a father. "It is not a shield. It needs the right timing and the right recipient. You cannot just hurl it, you will hurt yourself. You will hurt me. And they will walk away untouched. You wait for the opening. You wait until they are close enough to feel its impact. I picked up the box. It was heavy, heavier than 20 years of grief. It was the weight of the war to come. I will wait, I said. I did not drive back to my apartment. I did not go to my primary office with its plush mud boot and its watching eyes. I took the service roads around the complex perimeter to the south gate, a low-traffic entrance used by supply trucks and cleared contractors. I drove my personal vehicle directly into the subterranean maintenance bay, a place where my authorization as security chief gave me unquestioned access. I was 3 floors below ground in the windowless, concrete-shielded secondary security hub. When I finally opened the metal ammo can again, this room was my fortress. Its network connection was firewalled from the rest of the base, and its physical access was controlled only by me. I plugged in a secured, air-gapped laptop and an evidence-grade flatbed scanner. I worked with the cold precision of a bomb technician. The emotion I felt on the *first light* was a liability. Here, there was only data. I scanned every document, the invoices, the shipping manifests, the bank transfer authorizations. My father was right. It was a shell game. The money did not go to Hostile Dynamics. It was routed in escalating 7-figure payments to a company called Low Country Holdings, a local address, a post office box in North Charleston, a ghost. The invoices were the real key. They were not for guidance modules. They were for Project Blue Requiem. The term was repeated on every document, a code word, a blanket of bureaucratic language to hide what they were actually buying. They were purchasing premium hardware, but shipping defective scrap. Then I saw the signatures. The authorizations for the transfers, the final sign-off that approved the payments to Low Country Holdings, were not from Admiral Beck. Beck's name was nowhere. The signature was clean, confident, and perfectly legible, Pierce Holloway. I ran the name through the global naval database. My blood turned to ice. Vice Admiral Pierce Holloway. 20 years ago, he had been a captain serving as the chief procurement officer under Beck's command, the man handling the OEL account. Today, he was the deputy chief of naval operations for procurement, the 4-star admiral in charge of the entire multi-billion-dollar purchasing apparatus of the United States Navy. This was not a cold case. The man who had ordered my father's death, the man who had greenlit the cover-up, was now one of the most powerful men in the Pentagon. He was not a ghost, he was a king. I turned to the other items in the box. The handwritten note, the one Robert had used to trace the money, listed a few phone numbers, internal extensions, a couple of disconnected lines, and one cell phone number. I checked it against my own base directory, the list of all approved vendors and contractors for the Charleston Harbor Command Complex. A match. The number belonged to the primary account manager for CCI Secure, the civilian firm that held the multi-million-dollar contract for installing and maintaining our entire video surveillance system. The watcher in the atrium, the boot print, the 3-second data drop, it was all connected. Holloway's network was still active, and it was embedded inside my own security system. I pulled the server logs from the atrium. I isolated the video file from the morning Beck signed the book. A 3-second gap, a data stream interruption. A simple error report would show a system fault, but I did not run an error report. I ran a hash verification. I checked the digital fingerprint of the file segment just before the drop against the segment. Just after, the system reported a catastrophic hash mismatch. It was not a glitch. It was not a drop. The file had not been interrupted, it had been altered. Someone with high-level access had gone into the server and manually, surgically removed those 3 seconds. They had a man on the inside, and he worked for the camera company. He worked for Holloway. Finally, I took out the mini cassette. I found an old evidence intake cassette recorder in a storage locker. I put on headphones and pressed play. The audio was clear. 3 voices. My father, calm and professional. A man from old dynamics, his voice oily and impatient. And a third man, sharp, authoritative. Holloway, the recorded voice of the old dynamics representative, said, his tone oily and impatient, the specifications are within acceptable deviation. Commander, Holloway's voice replied, sharp and authoritative, Owell has assured us. You will sign the certification. Sir, my father's voice replied, with respect, the specifications are fraudulent. The shielding is non-existent. They will fail in cold water. I cannot, in good conscience, certify them. There was a pause, the scrape of a chair. Your conscience is not part of this equation, Robert, Holloway said, his voice dropping, all pretense of civility gone. This is a matter of strategic priority. Owell is a partner. You are a sailor. Sign the damned forms. I will not. I am filing a formal protest with the Inspector General. No, Holloway said, his voice like a knife. You will not. We are keeping this matter internal. You will not let this report cross the shore, Donovan. Do you understand me? You will not let it go federal. A click. The tape ended. Asterisk, don't let Donovan cross the shore. Asterisk, the internal metaphor for preventing a report from reaching the Federal Inspector General, or NCIS. They were containing it. I sat back, the hum of the server rack filling the silence. I had it all, the money trail, the shell company, the current threat, the voice of the man who gave the order, the proof of an active, ongoing cover-up inside my own complex. Robert's warning echoed in my head. Asterisk, don't detonate it. Wait for the shot. Asterisk, he was right. If I sent this package to the IG, Holloway would see it coming. He would bury the evidence, discredit me as a vindictive daughter, and the case would be classified into oblivion. He had done it once. He would do it again. I could not go over the wall. I had to use the system. But I had to do it my way. I opened my terminal. I created 2 separate files. The first was a formal security audit request addressed to the base ethics inspector. I used my full authority as chief of security. I did not mention Holloway. I did not mention Blue Requiem. I did not mention my father. I built the request on the one piece of evidence that was mine, that was current, and that was irrefutable. Subject, urgent audit request of contract vendor CCI Secure. Evidence of data tampering. Sir, at 0900 hours yesterday, I detected a catastrophic file integrity failure on security server C1. This was not a system error. It was a manual and intentional alteration of surveillance data by an unknown party. This constitutes a critical breach of our facility security. I have attached the hash verification report. I am requesting a fully confidential audit of CCI Secure, their personnel, and their access logs. Effective immediately, I hit send. I had just lit a small, contained fire. The IG was now obligated to investigate the camera company. They would start pulling on the string, and I knew exactly where it led. The second file was my insurance policy. I drafted a simple, non-confidential memo to the base's internal legal department, the JAG office. Subject, routine vendor contract review. Please provide the current contracts and service agreements for all on-site security hardware vendors, including CCI Secure, for a scheduled quarterly review. It was a backbone file, a simple, boring, bureaucratic request that was now logged in the public system. If anything happened to me, if I disappeared, that memo would sit in the system, a red flag pointing directly at the camera company. I encrypted the full contents of the ammo box, the scans, the audio, the transfer logs, onto a new, clean drive. I put that drive along with the original box back into my off-network, floor safe. I spun the dial. The tumblers clicked into place. I sat there in the silence of the concrete room. My father had been a ghost for 20 years. Now he was an asset. I was an operative, and Holloway was the target. I pulled out a secure, encrypted satellite phone, one reserved for catastrophic base emergencies. I dialed the number Robert had written on the back of the envelope. It rang twice. He picked up. I heard the faint sound of wind and water. "First light," he said. "Harbor," I replied. "The package is secure. I have digitized the contents. The target is active." There was a long pause on his end. "Holloway," he stated. It was not a question. "He's running procurement," I said. "He's still in charge." "Stella," Robert said, and his voice was no longer the commander, it was the father. "Listen to me. When I was digging before Beck pulled me out, I had a chief petty officer, a data tech, smart. He helped me trace the first transfers to Low Country. 2 days later, his car went off the Ravenel Bridge. The report said his brakes failed. He was 45 years old, Stella. A tragic accident. They do not just bury files. They bury people." I looked at the steel door of the safe. I thought of the public memo sitting in the JAG office. I thought of the ethics inspector, who was now legally obligated to investigate. "They were accidents because they were in the dark," I said, my voice cold, steady, and full of a certainty I had not felt in 20 years. "I am not in the dark. I am filing reports. I am using the process. I am using the rules. I am building this case inside the system, in front of everyone. There will be no more accidents. Not this time." My report to the ethics inspector was a slow-burning fuse. It was precise, but it was subterranean. Holloway was a creature of the shadows, a man who operated in the darkness between regulations. I had to force him into the light. My father's warning was to wait for the shot. I realized I had to build the target first, to paint it bright red in the middle of a crowded room. I went to the public affairs office. I proposed an event, not an investigation, but a celebration, a Heritage Day honor and truth, a small, localized ceremony in the Hall of Honor. It was the most benign, harmless-sounding piece of bureaucracy I could invent. "We will," I pitched, "simply honor the complex's history of integrity." It was approved in less than an hour. I drafted the invitation list myself. This was my first layer of defense. I invited the local American Legion Post. I invited the leaders of the regional Gold Star families. And I invited the local press, the print journalists, the ones with notepads, not cameras. Broadcast cameras trigger security protocols, reporters with pens just look like part of the scenery. It was a soft shield of public opinion. No one shoots, physically or politically, in a room full of veterans and grieving parents. Then I set the lure. I added a guest of honor to the program, submitted through official channels, Admiral Lionel Beck, retired. His name went on the public manifest, visible to anyone with mid-level access. It was a flag planted in the mud, a signal to the watchers that the old guard was mobilizing. The reaction was faster than I expected. It happened 2 nights before the event. I came in at 0600. The lock on my main office door was pristine. My desk was exactly as I had left it, but the small secondary safe, the one hidden behind the false bookshelf panel, the one I used for decoy files, was open. They had been surgical. They knew the combination, which meant the camera contractor, CCI Secure, had provided it. They had come for the Blue Requiem file. I had left them a snack, a single, slightly corrupted USB drive labeled Donovan Primary. It contained a partial scan of the bank transfers, but it was missing the key invoices. It had the OEL name, but not Holloway's signature. It was just enough truth to make them panic. Just enough missing data to make them believe I was still searching. I wanted them to think they had the advantage, that they knew exactly what I had. I wanted them to underestimate me. The real evidence, the ammo can, was still 3 floors below ground in the off-network safe. They had missed it. They were good, but they were looking for a grieving daughter. They were not looking for a security chief who ran decoys. I unclipped my handheld signal detector. I swept the room. It took less than 30 seconds. A faint, steady pulse from the overhead fluorescent light fixture, a high-frequency transmitter. They were listening. I left it exactly where it was. From now on, I would feed the bear. The next morning, I had a scheduled meeting with Admiral Beck in my office. He walked in, his face like granite. He did not sit. I received an anonymous call last night, he said, his voice flat, projecting perfectly toward the light fixture. No number, a synthesized voice. They told me I was too old for public events. They told me to stay home if I valued my health. Will you? I asked. Beck's pale eyes were cold. I will be there. I told them my leg was bothering me, but I would try. He was feeding their bug, too. He was a professional ghost, and he knew the game. That night, I used the sat phone from the shielded sublevel harbor. The house is dirty, I said. They are inside. They are listening. I am already gone. Robert's voice came back, clear and cold. The first light is just a boat now. I am inland. Do not contact me again until it is done. The line went dead. He was a ghost again, by necessity. The final piece of the puzzle came from my mother. She called me, her voice tight, strained, trying to sound normal. Stella, dear, she said, her voice tight, strained, trying to sound normal. Someone left something in our mailbox. I drove there in 10 minutes. It was a simple white business class envelope, no stamp, no address, hand-delivered. Inside, a single sheet of paper, laser-printed, do not let your daughter destroy her father's good name. He was a patriot. This ceremony is a disgrace. It was a masterful threat. It was not violent, it was psychological. Call the police, my mother said, her hands shaking. No, I said, folding the paper. The police are not part of this. This is an internal matter. You are fine, Mom. This is just noise. But I knew it was a final warning. They were telling me they could touch my family. I did not report it. Local police would log it, and Holloway's people would see the log. I was keeping the circle tight, letting them think they were pushing me into a corner. I returned to the base. The event was in 24 hours. I finalized my defenses. I called them my 3 soft barriers. Layer 1, legal. I personally briefed the head of the JAG office. I did not show him the evidence. I told him I was expecting administrative friction over the ceremony due to the nature of the honoree and requested a legal advisor be present. He assigned one, citing protocol. Layer 2, public affairs. I briefed the base spokesman. I told him I expected a high-profile guest who might be sensitive to media, and I needed him to run interference. He loved the idea of managing a VIP. Layer 3. The civilians, the veterans, and the Gold Star families. They were my true shield. They were the moral high ground, and I was going to stand right in the middle of them. The day of the event, the fire I had lit finally produced the smoke I wanted. My contact in the ethics inspector's office, the one investigating the camera company, sent me a coded message. Audit of CCI Secure has been escalated. They found the log deletions. The DC office is taking over. Holloway knew his internal firewall was breached. Then, an hour later, the base commander's scheduling office sent a base-wide logistics update. A routine inspection of command facilities was being scheduled for that afternoon. The inspecting officer, Vice Admiral Pierce Holloway from DC Procurement. He was not just sending his goons. The bait was so tempting, the threat of that missing file so great, that the king himself was coming to oversee the kill. The rumor was that he would drop by the Hall of Honor to observe the ceremony, as a matter of protocol. He was not coming to observe. He was coming to stop me. He thought he was the hunter, walking into a room to corner his prey. He had no idea he was the prey, walking into a cage I had built for him, piece by public piece. The Hall of Honor was a quiet, cold space designed to hold the weight of memory. The air was still, smelling of floor wax and old polished brass. Tall campaign flags from forgotten conflicts hung like sleeping giants against the mahogany-paneled walls, their colors muted by the soft, indirect lighting. In the center of the room, on a long oak table draped in navy blue velvet, sat the single open logbook, the same blue leather volume Beck had signed. I stood at the podium. The air was still, smelling of floor wax and old polished brass. Tall campaign flags from forgotten conflicts hung like sleeping giants against the mahogany-paneled walls, their colors muted by the soft, indirect lighting. In the center of the room, on a long oak table draped in navy blue velvet, sat the single open logbook, the same blue leather volume Beck had signed. I stood at the podium. Before me were perhaps 70 people, the Gold Star families, their faces etched with a quiet, permanent grief, sat in the front rows. Behind them, veterans from the local Legion post, their postures still hinting at military discipline. Sprinkled among them were the base's own command staff, a few curious junior sailors, and the local print reporters, pens poised over notebooks, my human shield. My voice, when I spoke, was amplified just slightly by the microphone. It sounded steady. I have rehearsed this. I began to talk about two words, honor and truth. They are carved into the seal of this command. We see them every day. But they are not just words. They are not decorations. They are, and must be, the spine of our service. Honor is the skeleton. Truth is the muscle that moves it. I paused. The room was utterly silent. Sometimes, I continued, truth is buried not by our enemies, but by our own processes, by expediency, by fear, by a failure of the system. And when that happens, honor demands that we dig, no matter how deep, no matter how long. I looked down at my notes, though I did not need them. Today, this command is officially restoring the full service citation of an officer whose record was left incomplete. An officer whose final act of integrity was filed away not as a profile in courage, but as an administrative loose end. I took a breath. Commander Robert Donovan, I said his name, my father's name, in this public space, and the world did not stop. A few people shifted in their seats. The name was unfamiliar, a footnote from 2 decades ago. Commander Donovan, I said, my voice gaining strength, served for 18 years. He was a logistics expert, a man who believed that the hardware we give our sailors is a sacred trust. His record is filled with commendations for efficiency and readiness, but his final citation, the one that matters, was never entered. I held up a single sheet of paper. Today, we are amending the honor log. I will read the amended citation in full. I read his service history, his deployments, his awards. Then the new part, and finally, for conspicuous integrity in the line of duty, in 2005, Commander Donovan identified a critical, life-threatening flaw in a primary navigation system designated for Allied partners. He refused to certify the hazardous equipment, prioritizing the lives of fellow service members over procedural compliance and significant contractor pressure. His actions, taken at great personal and professional cost, represent the highest embodiment of our core values. As the last word echoed in the hall, the heavy oak doors at the back of the room opened with a soft thud. Admiral Lionel Beck walked in. He was not in uniform. He wore a simple dark blue suit. He leaned heavily on a black wooden cane, and the thump drag of his bad leg and the cane on the polished floor was the only sound. The reporters turned. He did not look at them. He did not avoid them. His pale eyes were fixed on me, on the podium, on the blue logbook. In the front row, a woman with a gold star pin on her lapel, a mother I knew had lost her son in the North Atlantic, began to clap. It was a slow, measured, deliberate sound. A veteran in a Blue Legion cap joined her, then another. Within 10 seconds, the entire room was applauding. It was not a thunderous ovation, it was a wave of dawning, solemn respect. One by one, the Gold Star families stood. Then the veterans, then the sailors. The entire room was on its feet as Admiral Beck reached the front, standing just to the side of the dais, his presence a silent, powerful endorsement. I held up a hand. The applause slowly faded. The circumstances of this long overdue honor are complex, I said, my eyes sweeping the room, my voice hard and clear. They point not to the failure of one person, but to a structural failure. A failure within our own procurement and oversight system. A failure that allowed integrity to be punished and silence to be rewarded. A failure that for 20 years chose to bury the truth. I let that hang in the air. I can pledge to you, to the families here, and to the memory of all those who have served, that this command is committed to a full, transparent review of these past events. We are already in cooperation with the Inspector General's office to ensure that our commitment to truth is and remains absolute. I had just confirmed the IG investigation. I had not named Holloway, but I had put his entire department on notice. A movement to my left, from a side alcove where he had been observing from the shadows. Vice Admiral Pierce Holloway stepped into the light. He was in his summer whites, a constellation of stars on his shoulder boards, a chest full of ribbons. He radiated power and absolute, icy calm. He was flanked by a man in an expensive dark suit, a civilian who carried a leather briefcase. My assigned legal advisor, a young lieutenant, stiffened beside me. Holloway did not approach the podium. He stood just on the edge of the seated area, projecting the air of a superior officer arriving to correct a subordinate's minor, embarrassing error. "Chief Baker," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the room's respectful silence. "This is a touching display, but you are bordering on public slander. You are relitigating a closed file in a public forum based on sentiment. It is inappropriate, and I would advise you to conclude this ceremony immediately." He was threatening me here, in front of my human shield. My legal advisor started to speak, but I put a hand on his arm. I met Holloway's gaze. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. "Admiral Holloway," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the microphone. "Thank you for joining us. As I'm sure your office was briefed, this is a Heritage Day event, fully authorized by the Public Affairs Office and Base Command." I held up the official program, the one with Beck's name on it, the one his legal counsel was holding. "This is an educational presentation," I continued, my words precise, sterile. "As my assigned legal counsel can confirm, this is an administrative action to correct a service record. All facts presented are from declassified historical service files. We are simply and appropriately honoring a sailor's integrity." Holloway's eyes narrowed just slightly. I had just used his own bureaucratic shield against him. He could not shut down a fully authorized educational event without looking like a tyrant. In the back row, a young seaman apprentice, barely old enough to shave, raised a trembling hand. He looked terrified to be speaking, but he did it anyway. He called out. "Chief Baker, does honor mean forgiving?" The question was honest, simple, and devastating. I turned my full attention to him, but my answer was aimed directly at the Vice Admiral. "Honor means truth, seaman," I said. And sometimes honor does mean forgiving, but it can only happen after the truth is allowed to stand up on its own, fully, publicly. Truth always comes first. I turned back to the oak table. I turned to the page in the logbook where the new citation was now permanent. Admiral Beck, I said, my voice formal. As the ranking officer present who served alongside Commander Donovan, and as the former head of the North Atlantic Naval Intelligence Division, would you honor us by witnessing this restoration? Beck nodded. He stepped forward. He took the same heavy black fountain pen from his pocket, the pen that had started it all. With a steady hand, he signed his name beneath the citation, Lionel Beck, Admiral, USN, Ret. His signature was not just a signature, it was a second bullet, a confirmation, an act of open defiance. It was a seal of approval on the truth. Holloway watched his face, a mask of iron. As Beck capped his pen, I looked up. I looked past the flags, past the crowd, to the small, dark dome of the C1 camera in the ceiling corner. The camera maintained by CCI Secure, the camera that was, I knew, feeding a live signal to Holloway's network. As I watched, the tiny red status light, normally solid, flashed twice. A fraction of a second later, a sound so faint I almost missed it. A high-pitched electronic beep from the camera's internal speaker. It was the signal I had arranged with the ethics inspector's cyber team. It was the handshake. The external feed, the one CCI Secure controlled, had been severed. The camera's data was now being mirrored directly and exclusively to the IG Secure server. Holloway was still in the room, but he was blind. He was trapped inside my box, and the main event was about to begin. The ceremony ended, the applause faded. The Gold Star families and veterans filed out, their faces full of a new, complex understanding. They had been my shield. Now the quiet, surgical work began. Admiral Beck gave me a single, sharp nod. Before his escort guided him out, Holloway remained, a statue of white-hot rage dressed in immaculate summer whites. He was speaking in a low, furious whisper to his civilian lawyer. He thought the public spectacle was over, that he had weathered the storm. He thought wrong. I did not approach him. I turned first to my base legal advisor, the young lieutenant. Counsel, I said, please secure the Hall of Honor. No one else enters. Then I walked to a man in a simple grey suit standing near the back. A man who had been observing the entire event with the flat, analytical gaze of someone who was not a spectator. He was the Joint Inspector General representative I had personally invited under the guise of an Ethics Day observer. I did not speak. I handed him a single encrypted USB drive. I handed a precise duplicate to my own legal counsel. Lieutenant, I said, my voice low and formal. This is the Blue Requiem package. Please review it. On that drive, there was no sentiment. There was only data. The first file was the one I had not shown in public, the original Blue Requiem memo, the one my father had refused to sign. It was a single-page authorization to approve the shipment of the defective modules, overriding all internal objections. And at the bottom, the signature, Piers Holloway, Captain, USN. The signature was the original SIN, but the data I provided next was the precise timeline of the crime. I had cross-referenced the memo's metadata with my father's service file. The memo was signed on April 12, 2005. My father's MIA report, the one Beck had filed under duress, was dated April 14, 2005. Holloway had given the illegal order. 2 days later, my father was gone. It was not a loose end, it was a cleanup. The IG representative looked at me. This is a 20-year-old allegation, Chief Baker. Which is why I included the evidence of the active cover-up, I replied just as quietly. File 2. File 2 was the full diagnostic report from the atrium camera. My initial probe with the base ethics inspector had, as I expected, flushed out a confession. A junior CCI technician, the camera contractor, had already signed a statement. He admitted that he had been performing a remote system reboot during Beck's visit, and had inadvertently caused the 3-second data drop, a simple, regrettable accident. But my hash verification analysis, which was the next document, proved his confession was a lie. A reboot creates a system log. This was not a reboot, it was a manual excision. The file had been surgically altered by a human being with administrative-level access. The technician lied. He did, I agreed. But he is not the target. He's a pawn. File 3. File 3 was the base's physical access log for the server room that controlled the C1 camera. The technician who had confessed was not even on site that day, but someone else was. A visiting specialist from CCI Secure, authorized for priority system maintenance. I had run the visitor's credentials against the national database. His primary employment was not with CCI. He was a civilian network engineer on special assignment from Holloway's own C4I procurement division in Washington, D.C. I had just connected the 20-year-old crime to a living, breathing act of evidence tampering committed by an agent of Holloway's department inside my complex less than a week ago. The IG representative's expression did not change, but his posture did. He stiffened. File 4, I said. It was the money. The simple, elegant flowchart I had built, the payments for Blue Requiem, routing to the ghost company, Low Country Holdings. Then the corporate records, showing Low Country Holdings being quietly dissolved and its assets absorbed by Oil Dynamics in 2006, just 1 year after my father died. And finally, the recent corporate filing showing Dynamics rebranding. Oil Meridian, the IG rep read aloud, the name tasting like poison. The snake shed its skin, sir, I said. But the venom is the same. Holloway signed the order. My father disappeared. The money was laundered. And 20 years later, Holloway's own man is tampering with my evidence to cover it up. The representative looked up from the screen. He nodded slowly. Chief Baker, you have established a clear threshold for a federal criminal investigation, but this stays quiet. This is now a matter of national security. We cannot and will not act publicly. Not yet. I had expected this. The IG would move, but they would move like a glacier. Holloway was a 4-star admiral. They needed more. They had the paper. They had the digital footprint, but they did not have the man. I still needed to tie the Pierce Holloway on that 20-year-old memo to the vice admiral standing 20 feet away. I knew there was one last piece. The lock had been built. Now I had to turn the key. I turned and walked toward Holloway. He stood with his lawyer, a shark in a $2,000 suit. Holloway's face was a mask of controlled fury. He was waiting for me. He thought I was coming to apologize. I stopped 5 feet away. I did not address him with anger. I used the coldest weapon in my arsenal, perfect, dispassionate procedure. Admiral Holloway, I said, my voice neutral. Sir, his lawyer stepped forward slightly. Chief Baker, this ceremony was an act of profound insubordination. We will be filing a formal. I held up my hand, cutting him off. I kept my eyes locked on Holloway. Sir, I said, my voice neutral, this event has, as you noted, brought up sensitive historical data. My primary concern as Chief of Security is ensuring the integrity of this command's records. It is clear that the official record, which I presented, and your memory of the events are in conflict. Holloway's eyes were chips of ice. My memory is not in conflict, Chief. Your record is a fantasy. Understood, sir, I said. Which is why, in the interest of full objectivity, and to ensure your concerns are properly documented, I must formally request an immediate private debrief. A simple clarification for the record. The lawyer's head snapped toward me. He saw the trap. My client has nothing to debrief, the lawyer said. This is not a legal proceeding, counselor, I said, shifting my gaze to him. This is an internal security matter. A public discrepancy has been noted. Base regulations require me to log all relevant perspectives to ensure a balanced after-action report. I was drowning him in the very bureaucracy he lived by. Holloway smiled, a thin, predatory expression. He saw the trap, too, but he thought he was the predator. He thought I was a mid-level chief, alone in a room, who had just fired her last bullet. She's right, counselor, Holloway said to his lawyer. Let's clear this up. We would not want Chief Baker's balanced report to be incomplete. He thought he was going to walk into a room and intimidate me. He thought he was going to threaten my career and tear my report apart. Thank you, Admiral, I said. We can use secure conference room 3. It is just down the hall. Holloway nodded. After you, Chief Baker. We walked, a solemn procession, Holloway, his lawyer, my own base legal counsel, and me. I led them into the windowless, soundproofed room, a room that was, as a matter of standard base procedure for any formal security debrief, equipped with a fully authorized, legally admissible, high-fidelity audio and video recording system, a system I had personally activated 10 minutes before the ceremony began. The final piece was not a document, it was a voice, and I was about to make him talk. Secure Conference Room 3 was a grey, windowless box. It was designed for classified briefings, which meant it was also designed for interrogations. The walls were covered in sound-dampening foam panels, and the air was recycled, carrying the flat, sterile smell of electronics and industrial carpet. The silence was absolute. We sat at a heavy, circular table that was bolted to the floor. There was Vice Admiral Pierce Holloway, his expensive civilian lawyer, and my base legal counsel, the young lieutenant, who looked like he was trying to physically shrink into his uniform. His job had just escalated from advising on a ceremony to witnessing a potential court-martial. Admiral Beck was outside. He had nodded to me as I entered, a silent, I am here. He was my witness, my anchor, and the living history that Holloway had tried to erase. I placed my laptop on the table and opened it. Holloway watched me, his demeanor one of tolerant, impatient authority, like a king granting an audience to a stable hand. This is a formal security debrief, I began, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. It was the only way I could do this. I was not a daughter. I was an officer of the command, and the recording light on the ceiling camera was a solid, steady red. The time is 14:30 hours. Present are Vice Admiral Pierce Holloway, Mr. David Thorne, Counsel for the Admiral, and Lieutenant Marcus Cole, Base Legal Counsel. I am Chief Stella Baker, facilitating. Holloway's lawyer, Thorne, tented his fingers. Let's be clear, Chief. The Admiral is here as a courtesy. This is not a deposition. This is a procedural requirement. I counted, my eyes on the screen. I am here to resolve the discrepancies between the public record as presented today and the Admiral's statements. Let's begin. I did not look at Holloway. I read from my prepared summary, my voice a monotone. 1. At 0900 hours, 7 days prior, a surveillance data integrity failure was detected in the C1 camera feed. My subsequent analysis confirmed a 3-second manual data excision, not a system fault. 2. The visiting contractor logs for that time slot show a CCI secure technician present, an individual whose employment records link him as a full-time network specialist assigned to the Admiral's C4I procurement division in Washington. 3. A historical audit of Project Blue Requiem, initiated by my office, confirms a payment structure diverting millions of dollars to a shell corporation, Low Country Holdings, which was later absorbed by OL Dynamics. 4. The original authorization memo for the shipment of the defective modules, which Commander Donovan refused to sign, was overridden and approved by Captain Pierce Holloway. I concluded. That is the data set. I stopped. I looked up. The room was silent. Holloway let out a soft sound, almost a laugh. He smiled, a cold, thin expression that did not touch his eyes. He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. That is an extraordinary story, Chief Baker, he said, his voice laced with condescending pity. You have clearly done an immense amount of research. You are building a very impressive hero myth for your father, but you have forgotten the truth. The truth, which the actual file reflects, is that Commander Donovan was a disgruntled officer. He disagreed with a command decision. He became emotionally unstable, and then he disappeared, most likely by his own hand, rather than face a board of inquiry for insubordination. Thorne, the lawyer, nodded. The Admiral's recollection is consistent with the record. What you have, Chief, is a conspiracy theory built from grief. It is admirable in a tragic sort of way, but it is not evidence. Then let's talk about evidence, I said. I slid a laminated document across the polished table. It spun once and stopped directly in front of Holloway. This is a recovered fax, I said. Dated April 10, 2005, 2 days before the authorization memo. It is a technical specification swap sent from OEL Dynamics. It details the replacement of the shielded mil-spec guidance modules with the unshielded commercial-grade ones. Holloway did not touch it. He stared at it. We all know faxes are fossils, I continued. But they leave fossils in the system, metadata. The header on this fax, I continued, the digital routing stamp from the old server, shows it did not just originate from OEL. It was sent from their machine, routed through a secure shell, and finalized on a terminal inside the Charleston procurement office. Your terminal, Admiral. You did not just approve the fraud, you helped OEL write the instruction manual for it. Thorne's eyes flickered to the header. He saw it. He saw the trap. Thorne started, but Holloway cut him off with a sharp look. A 20-year-old piece of paper, Holloway snapped, his voice losing its calm. It proves nothing. Then let's try something more current, I said. I tapped the space bar on my laptop. The room filled with the tiny, sharp sound of a 20-year-old cassette tape. The audio was clean. I had scrubbed it for hours. First, my father's voice. Calm, professional. With respect, the specifications are fraudulent. The shielding is non-existent. I cannot in good conscience certify them. Then a new voice, younger, harder, but unmistakably Holloway's. Your conscience is not part of this equation, Robert. This is a matter of strategic priority. OEL is a partner. You are a sailor. Sign the damned forms. I will not. I am filing a formal protest with the Inspector General. No. Holloway's recorded voice said, the sound cold and final, you will not. We are keeping this matter internal. You will not let this report cross the shore, Donovan. Do you understand me? You will not let it go federal. I hit the space bar. The silence that rushed back into the room was deafening. My own lawyer, Lieutenant Cole, was pale. He looked sick. Holloway stared at the laptop, as if it were a snake. His face was blotched with a dark, furious red. His mask of control was gone, burned away by the sound of his own voice giving an illegal order. That tape, he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. That tape was supposed to have been destroyed. It should have been destroyed with the rest of Donovan's workstation. It was out. The fatal unforced error, the admission. Lieutenant Cole, God bless him, snapped to attention. His voice, though trembling, was clear and procedural. Note for the record, Cole said, his eyes on the red recording light. At 14:42 hours, Admiral Holloway has just confirmed prior knowledge of the referenced audio evidence. He has also confirmed knowledge of a deliberate and illegal destruction of government property and evidence pertaining to a command inquiry. Holloway's lawyer put his hand on the Admiral's arm, his face ashen. "Pierce, do not say another word." Holloway looked at me then, his eyes burning with a hatred that was almost physical. "This is over. You have nothing but ghosts. This is finished." "You are right, Admiral," I said. "This is not about ghosts." I slid the final piece of evidence across the table. It was the high-resolution photograph I had taken from the honor log just last week. Holloway glanced at it. "It's Beck's signature," he said. "It proves nothing." "Look again," I said. I slid the second photo next to it. My 16th birthday card. I used a pen to point. I pointed to the R in retired on the log. Then I pointed to the R in Robert on the card. The same aggressive upright loop, the same defiant kick of the final leg. "This," I said, "is my father's handwriting. This is his signature. He signed this book not 20 years ago last week in my atrium." The arrogance, the anger, all of it evaporated. In its place was the cold, sudden physical shock of a man who had seen an actual ghost. He understood. The tape was history. "My father, Commander Robert Donovan, is alive, Admiral," I said, my voice dropping. The ice in my veins finally making it to my words. "He is alive, and he was in my facility." Which brings me to my final procedural question for the record. I leaned forward, locking his gaze. "You had a man watching me. You had a man delete the video feed to cover the event, but someone authorized that event. Someone with command-level clearance manually bypassed protocol and added Admiral Beck to the morning manifest to sign that book. It was not me. It was not Beck. It was not my father who Admiral Holloway gave the order to let them in. It was the final, perfect trap. He was caught. He was caught between admitting he authorized the meeting, proving collusion with Beck, or admitting that Robert Donovan, a man he'd had disappeared, was running an operation inside my complex without his knowledge. He was either complicit or incompetent. He stared at the photograph of the R. He was beaten. He pushed his chair back, the sound of violent scrape in the quiet room. "End this," he snapped at his lawyer. "This debrief is concluded," Thorne announced, standing and gathering his papers. "The Admiral is leaving." Holloway stood, yanking his uniform jacket straight. He did not look at me. He looked at the door. He walked to it, pulled the heavy handle, and swung it open. He froze. Standing in the doorway was the IG representative from the ceremony. He was not alone. Flanking him were two men in dark suits, their badges clearly visible. NCIS. Beyond them, standing straight, his cane at his side, was Admiral Beck. The IG representative looked past Holloway's frozen form, his eyes meeting mine. "Thank you, Chief Baker," he said, his voice calm and official. "We have the entire exchange." The audio-visual feed from this room was piped directly to my team as part of our active investigation into CCI Secure. Holloway turned his face, a mask of grey disbelief. He looked at me. He finally understood the ceremony was not the trap, the Hall of Honor was just the bait. This windowless room was the cage. The two NCIS agents stepped into the room, respectfully but firmly flanking the Admiral. I felt nothing. No joy, no victory, just the click of the final tumbler falling into place. I closed my laptop. I unplugged the small cassette recorder and placed it in my briefcase. I snapped the latches shut, the sound final and loud in the small, silent room. I stood. I picked up my briefcase. I looked at Vice Admiral Pierce Holloway, a man who had ruled my life for 20 years from the shadows, now just a man in a white suit trapped in a grey box. "Honor is not negotiable, Admiral," I said. I walked past him out into the hall and met Admiral Beck's steady gaze. I walked out of that windowless, grey room, my footsteps echoing in the corridor, but we did not go far. The Inspector General representative, the man in the grey suit, held up a hand. His face was like carved stone. "Chief Baker, Admiral Holloway," he said. "We are not finished, please." He did not ask, he commanded. He gestured back toward the Hall of Honor. We re-entered, a strange, silent procession, Holloway, flanked by the two NCIS agents, his lawyer, Thorne, his briefcase held uselessly at his side, and me flanked by Lieutenant Cole and Admiral Beck. The hall was not empty. The IG, in a move of tactical genius, had asked the witnesses to remain. The Gold Star families, the veterans, the print reporters, they were sitting in the pews, no longer a shield, but a jury. The air was thick with a silence that was louder than any alarm. They knew the ceremony was over. This was the reckoning. The IG representative walked to the heavy oak table in the center of the room. He placed a single, multi-page document on the dark velvet runner. It was a formal transfer log. "We are, as of this moment," the IG announced, his voice projecting to every corner of the room, "convening a formal investigation based on evidence of criminal conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and fraud. The evidence provided by Chief Baker and the admissions provided by Admiral Holloway in Secure Room 3 have met the threshold." Holloway, his face the color of wet cement, started to move. "This is highly irregular. This is a matter for, it is highly irregular, Admiral," the IG cut him off, his voice like ice. "A conspiracy to supply defective hardware to our allies, resulting in the presumed loss of an officer, is the definition of irregular. We are therefore taking an irregular step to ensure the chain of custody is absolute and witnessed. We are finalizing the evidence transfer now." He slid the form across the table. It stopped perfectly aligned next to the open blue leather honor log, right next to the page that now bore my father's restored citation. "This is a formal receipt of evidence, Admiral," the IG said, "and an acknowledgement that you are the subject of this investigation. We require your signature." Holloway stared at the paper. He was being ordered to sign his own death warrant in public, in front of the families of the men he had endangered. The IG representative reached into his own coat pocket. He did not produce a standard government pen. He picked up the heavy black fountain pen that Beck had used. The pen that had started this. He uncapped it and placed it deliberately on the table between the logbook and the transfer form. A single pen linking the lie to the truth. I looked at Admiral Beck. He stood just 3 steps from the table, a silent statue. His body was rigid, but his hand, the one gripping the head of his cane, was shaking, a fine, uncontrollable tremor, the physical cost of holding a 20-year secret. But his eyes, when they met mine, were steady. They were clear. Holloway did not move. The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. He was calculating, looking for an escape. He had dismissed my evidence as the fantasy of a grieving daughter. He had dismissed the audio tape as a ghost from the past. I would give him a ghost he could not ignore. I pulled the encrypted satellite phone from my jacket. I keyed the single-button auto dial. My voice was low, but in the pressurized silence of that room, it was the only sound. "First light. Now?" The IG representative nodded to his technician. The man tapped a key on a laptop connected to the room's secure speaker system. A faint electronic hiss. And then a voice filled the Hall of Honor. It was not a recording, it was live. It was rough, like sand and salt. "This is Commander Robert Donovan." A woman in the front row, a Gold Star mother, put her hand to her mouth, a stifled cry. The voice continued, calm, powerful, and alive. I confirm that the report on Project Blue Requiem filed in 2005 is mine. I confirm that Vice Admiral Pierce Holloway gave me a direct and illegal order to certify fraudulent hardware, and I refused. I confirm that my disappearance was staged by Admiral Beck to save my life from that order. Holloway was shaking his head, whispering, no, no. What? Then the final, devastating sentence, the one that sealed the truth. I lived to say this. As my father's words, I lived, echoed off the mahogany walls, the IG representative began to read, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a legal scalpel. Under Federal Statute 18 U.S.C., all evidence, including the verified audiovisual capture from Secure Conference Room 3, the original files from the Blue Requiem project, and a preceding live sworn testimony of Commander Robert Donovan, is hereby sealed and transferred to the custody of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Another agent moved in with a document scanner. The machine whirred to life, its bright light flashing, as it ingested the evidence piece by piece. Flash the Holloway memo. Flash the Low Country Holdings Bank transfer. Flash the *Holloway memo. Flash the Low Country Holdings Bank transfer. The facts from Austell. Each flash was a hammer blow. Holloway stood paralyzed, a man drowning in the light. He looked at the IG. He looked at the NCIS agents flanking him. He looked at the pen on the table. His eyes darted to the crowd, searching for what an ally. An escape. His gaze locked onto the Gold Star mother in the front row, the woman who had lost her son in the North Atlantic. She was not angry. She was not crying. She was just looking at him. Her eyes held the flat, heavy, unbearable weight of the truth he had tried to bury. That look broke him. The last of his authority, the last of his arrogance, shattered. He was just a criminal in a white uniform. His hand, trembling violently, reached for the pen. He picked it up. He looked at the document. He uncapped the pen. He stopped, his hand hovering over the signature line for one agonizing second. Then he pressed the nib to the paper. He signed, Pierce Holloway. The black ink was dark, wet, and absolute. It was irreversible. He let the pen drop from his fingers. It clattered against the oak table. I stepped forward. I picked up the pen. I looked at Holloway, his eyes now dead, vacant. I deliberately, slowly pressed the cap back onto the fountain pen. A solid, final click. I raised my head. Behind Holloway, I heard the sharp metallic sound of the NCIS agent opening his cuffs. I heard the click, click, click as the steel ratcheted closed around the Admiral's wrist. The agent began to read him his rights, his voice a low, procedural monotone. Reporters were shouting. The veterans were on their feet, but I was perfectly still. I turned away from the man in handcuffs. I faced the table. I placed my right hand flat on the blue leather cover of the honor log, my fingers brushing against the embossed gold seal. I looked at the page inside, at the citation my father had earned, at the signature he had written, that defiant are kicking up like a challenge. My father was alive, the truth was free, and it was finally standing tall. Thank you for listening. Let us know in the comments where you are listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.